Arian.
And Sarita's in the
Okay, it's
waiting
7.
room.
They're texting me.
Okay.
We're in the waiting room. People are so
Okay.
funny. I'm like, I see
Admit
you.
all. Here we go.
All right.
Go team. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Yay.
Okay.
Dr. Maria. Ooh. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So happy that you're here. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on a Friday night to be with us. We appreciate it so much. Welcome to our first Global Lightbridge live stream. Yay. Thank you. And I'll start off by introducing you to our moderator and co-host, Alexa Freeberg. She's going to explain how all of this will work. Okay, so go ahead, Alexa.
So thank you all for joining. This is not my expertise to moderate, but I absolutely support Wendy and everything that she does. So I just wanted to share a few little things on how it's going to work. We're expecting this to go about an hour, and in the to make it as efficient as possible, Alberto's going to share with us for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to have a 15-minute Q&A. I will be giving him a verbal 5-minute heads up, and I say that ahead of time so that hopefully it won't interrupt his flow and it won't interrupt our flow of listening, so that you'll know that that's what that is. And for the Q&A, if you would, in the chat, if you would type your question as succinctly and clearly, then when we get to that 15 minutes, I will read those out and Alberto can answer those for us. So, and if there's anything else, you can send something to me in the chat and I'll be monitoring that. So that's all. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Alexa. Now, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Alberto Lopez. He is a parallel starseed with a love for science. He's an inventor, a professional with an extensive, broad spectrum background, and a deep desire to share his knowledge. Alberto, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We're ready for whatever you have to share.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm glad that everybody had an opportunity to come and share. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the higher self and our connection to the universe. I remember when my daughter Luna, when she was born, as she came out of mommy, the nurses immediately jumped at her, literally, and started cleaning her with vigorous efficiency, to the point that to a baby, it feels like 1,000 people are hitting her. It's kind of a traumatic event. So she started crying. And as that was taking place, I went to her and in a quiet voice, I said, Mi niña, ya llegaste. She immediately quieted down and she recognized me. This is important because this is how we are to our higher self. We are the infant. We are the infant who has a hard time communicating. We can't see very well, but our higher self knows us completely, loves us infinitely, and they've seen us from the very beginning, and they'll be with us through the rest of our life. If I succeed today, you're no longer going to need to speak with gurus or listen to experts. If I'm able to help, you will be able to find answers to anything you want, from general knowledge to why are you here, what your destiny is, what are the things that are important to you. So to get us started, I would like to ask everybody to just, if you can, type in on on your on your text box. Type in what do you know that brainstorming means? The word brainstorming, if you're familiar with the term. Let me know if when you see an answer, okay?
Flow of ideas and thoughts.
See if anybody else says anything else.
Multiple minds working together, many ideas, a collective insight brought forward by a group of people, exchange of ideas, no judgment, creating along with others, brainstorming, to put down all of your ideas without censorship, rush of ideas, producing quick ideas or solutions to a particular situation. It is used a lot in business, gathering solutions, ideas
Exactly.
of groups of a collective, and ditto to everything said so far.
Yeah, the term, I remember it starting at the end of the 90s. Back then, Fast Company was a magazine that was taking off, and they were supposed to have all these great ideas. The world was changing, everything was going online, and we could, we, the media was full of messages about billionaires who had just started an online company and they found wealth. So at the company where I worked at the time, we we wanted to see if we could find a way to make the company an online success. And we used to have brainstorming sessions. And despite the fact that brainstorming sessions were supposed to be without judgment, as many commented, the reality of the meetings was that they there was a lot of competition, almost like if everybody felt they were going to come up with the brightest idea and that it was going to be the perfect thing for the company and only they would win or only they would come ahead. And it was also very rational. There was a lot of people tried to force themselves into thinking. And I remember that it failed completely. No one, not one of us, could come up with a single way of turning the business into an online success. It just didn't work. So later on, I developed a system for for the creative teams that I managed, and the system relied on it was simple. It relied on making people not think, forcing them into not thinking. So I would call a group of people, let's say 6 individuals from across different departments. And I would shower them literally with information. I would tell them everything about the problems that we had to face. I would tell them what the goals were, what other people were doing. I gave them as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. The intention was not to let them think about any of it. And they were literally just drinking out of a fire hydrant. Then we would end the meeting, and I would tell them that it was completely prohibited for them to work on it, on the problem. They had to completely forget about it, go back to their busy life, do what they had to do. And the only thing I asked them to do was that if they had anything that popped in their mind after the shower, after they wake up, when they go running, just jot it down and bring it to the next meeting. The next meeting was going to be 3 days later, typically 2 or 3 days later. I literally told them not to work on it. And I said that if I saw anybody working on the problem, I was going to fire them on the spot. I was very serious about it. So each person thought that it couldn't work. They went home, woke up the next morning, had maybe one idea, and that's it. So they came back to the meeting thinking that they were not going to contribute very much. I would then ask the people in the meeting to start describing what they jotted down, what they wrote. And as we went across the room, we realized that every single note matched very well with the rest of the concepts, with the rest of the ideas that were being put forth. They were almost in synchrony. They were related to each other, they supported each other. And by the time we finished, the answer was right in front of us. There was no doubt. We had just now come up with a new name for a product. We just now come up with a new campaign for marketing. We, I mean, I did this with marketing teams. I did this with product development teams. I did this with coding engineers, that needed to match devices, like for example, the BlackBerry at the time with Mercedes-Benz vehicles with the fiber optics system in them. So we found solutions within 15 minutes. They did that without thinking. That was not supposed to be, because brainstorming sessions were supposed to be all about using your brain. I didn't I didn't want them to use the brain. When we think of the brain, we think of the neocortex, the prefrontal lobe, the wrinkly part that you see on all the illustrations. I wanted them to use their intuitive side. What they were doing literally is they were taking the information. Each bit of information comes with its own code, its own signal, its own frequency. And they were literally just taking it in and passing it on to the universe through their intuitive system, their limbic system. And then as they were in a state of ease, state of balance, the universe will bring the information back, because whatever the problem was, the universe would match it. It would match an answer with the same resonance. And this is the reason why they all came up with different answers, but all the answers matched. So this was, to me, the first indication I had in how to get information. Now, many of you have heard about the telepathy tapes by now. In the telepathy tapes, these are recordings by a scientist who has been studying children who are severely handicapped, severely dysfunctional. These are autistic children who are known as non-speakers. They discover something interesting. These children could read their mother's thoughts. They could read their mind. And as they looked deeper, they found that not only could they read their mind, but also the mind of their siblings and teachers and other people. Looking even further into these children, they discover that they have a place they call the Hill, where thousands of children come together at any one point through the day, and they communicate with each other telepathically. So these children who are otherwise very lonely, they found friends who lived in other countries. These are children who they've never met before, but they were able to communicate with them and share experiences. In fact, they teach things to each other. A lot of these children speak 6 or 7 languages because of what they've learned from the Hill. And they found that they could get any answer. Some of them describe it as being able to go into a library, and this is not the Hill itself. This is one of the other skills that they developed, or the abilities that they have. They describe it as going into a library, and of course we know that's the Akashic records, where they could go and find answers to any question. See, one of the problems I have a lot of friends who are engineers, and they struggle to understand the subjects of spirituality and the subjects of, like what I just described. How can not thinking give you an answer? The reason why they struggle with it is because they have been programmed. They grew up in what is called material science. So, material science or materialistic science tells you that if it is not something that you can touch and measure, it doesn't exist. Well, we know that love is you can't measure it. So, I mean, is every one of those scientists going to tell their mom that the love she feels for them doesn't exist? Of course not. But there's a gap in there, and the gap, of course, is covered, or the answer is it comes from quantum physics. But even in quantum physics, a lot of students struggle to understand the science because they continue to be anchored on the material world. I back in when I began to wake up, I had an urgency to learn quantum physics. I grew up with Ohm's laws and the laws of thermodynamics. Professionally, I was able to work in product development, and I have multiple patents, and they're all tied to the electrical engineering field. And I didn't even believe in God at the time, but I had a background in acoustics, and that gave me an understanding of waves, resonances, frequencies. So when I studied quantum physics, I understood it very well because I was not anchored on the physical side. I was able to immediately go towards the resonance side of things. So I could, at the time, if you described the room and the number of loudspeakers, I could determine very easily. I could project in my mind what kind of cancellations there would be. The love pattern between the different frequencies, and you know I could get very technical in the way I described what was going to happen, and it was pretty accurate. So when I looked into quantum physics, I just saw everything from the very beginning as just energy, nothing else but energy, and the difference is always just the frequency. Even if you look at 1 hertz, when we look at frequencies, we talk in hertz, cycles per second. Even if you look at just the 1 unit, you can divide that unit in an infinite number of times. That means there's infinites everywhere, and those infinites allows to have an infinite number of universes, an infinite number of timelines, multiple dimensions. Everything fits within just the concept of energy. So what 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 we're doing when we're connecting by not thinking is see that the brain is good at making decisions like should I wake up, should I dress this way, how should I answer to this call. But when it comes to complex systems, complex problems, the universe is really good at it because if we see everything as just energy, then we understand that time is just there for us to interpret it. We cannot digest everything around us, so we have to take it in little slices. That's why we have time. And distance is also there just so that we can just interpret it. So that means time and distance don't exist. That means everything is here and now. If everything is here and now and it's just a frequency and it only changes, it's energy and it only changes the frequency, then we should be able to just tune to that frequency like a radio tunes to 94.5 or 97.1 and be able to get the answer. And when you have questions, each each question, each word has its own frequency. So you already have those frequencies. All you need to do is quiet the mind, be in the right emotional state to be able to tune into it. So it isn't a matter of getting answers, it's not a matter of using the brain, it's a matter of tuning in to the universe. When I began to have my downloads, right after I learned quantum physics, and I opened up to the idea of the here and now, I began to have downloads. And the very first download, it felt like an idea. Like if I suddenly had an idea about something, The only difference is when you have an idea, typically it's just one thought. But these were more like hooks, where once I got the first thought, I would pull on it and there was more information behind. And then I kept pulling, there was more information and more information and more information. So what came to me in a matter of seconds, I decided to write it down. And what came to me in a matter of seconds became a week's worth of writing. At first, it just felt like ideas about things that I had an interest in or that I knew. But then the second set of downloads were about things that I had no knowledge whatsoever, no understanding. I didn't know anything about them. I had no interest. I never had an interest in medicine, and suddenly I found out exactly the whole process of how cancer happens. The process of what creates a virus. What is a virus? And I didn't know anything about those things. I understood cancer so well that I was able to come up with a formula to predict the probability of somebody getting cancer in their life. And the formula proved to be very accurate when I compared it between different groups of individuals, like air attendants and power plant engineers, and different groups living at different altitudes. So this was information that was coming to me that I had no previous understanding or knowledge or interest. But I was able to go and research the information to see if it was true. And I became very close with Google Scholar, where I went in looking at those subjects, and I was able to find out that every single thing I received was true, was correct. There was a scientific study someplace that showed that everything was right. This was a very important moment in my life because at that instant, I realized that the information that comes to you from the universe is always correct. So I accepted what came next. And next came the downloads that explained how souls work. I couldn't go to Google Scholar to find out about them, but I trusted them. It went beyond trusting, it became a knowing. I knew that what came was correct. I had no more doubts. And I understood why the universe expanded. I understood who God was. I understood why souls do the things that they do. And I realized that there was one time that I started asking questions. And within minutes, I would get answers. Seconds sometimes. All I needed to do was be in a meditative state. But I could literally just get myself very relaxed very quickly, and answers will pop up. They came in all sorts of forms. Sometimes it was somebody walking by, and one of the words they used will jump at me. Other times I would be driving, and there will be a sign that had the answer I was looking for. And it was almost serendipitous. But the one thing that was for sure is that those were questions that were simple. When I asked really tough questions, I was almost a little bit upset that I had to go through all this interpretation. And I literally told my higher self that I was not a child and that I wanted to be treated with respect. But the problem is, see, I was angry. My energy was absolutely not the right one. Have you ever heard people pray in this fashion where they say, God, why did you punish me? Pity. I'm a victim. Or God, you better solve this. Anger, conflict. You have to be in the energy of those higher consciousness. I'm not surprised people use low energy to try to communicate, because we live in a world where we're slaves, and in this system, that's what we're programmed to be. We're angry, we're fearful, but the reality is that if you want to talk to an angel, if you want to talk to your higher self, God, you have to go up in energy and That's just to be able to create a channel. You have to then clear your mind to be able to listen and understand. When I talked to Luna after her birth, she didn't understand what I said, but she knew I was talking to her. At some point, the same thing happens. So if I go back to the questions and to trying to find the solutions through the creative teams that I described at work, you can use that sort of methodology. Load yourself up with information so that you can have the frequency of what you're trying to solve, and then stop thinking about it. That would be useful for general information. If everything is here and now, that means that the whole universe is is here and now. That means that there's answers. You can find answers for every question that could ever be asked, and they're all going to be here and now. And all you need to do is just tune into them. So by opening yourself up, by not thinking, by using the right frequency, in other words, load yourself with a question, let it go, the answer will come to you. When it comes to why are you here, why, what is your goal in life, those are more personal type of questions. That's when your higher self needs to get involved, because after all, the reason why you incarnated on the family you did, the reason why you have lived where you have lived, and why you married who you married, it's all because of the plan of the higher self, which is you. And remember, your higher self loves you very much. It's just the fact that we are the ones who can't understand it. We are the ones who live in a very low energy state. So if we bring ourselves to a loving frequency, joyful, where we accept, we ask the right questions from the right frequency. And most important is that, remember, time doesn't exist except for us who can't process everything. So if you if you have an urgency, what's not you're not it's not going to work, because time for your higher self, time for an angel doesn't exist. You don't get what you want, you get what you need. You don't get it when you want it, you get it when you need it. So the as you ask questions to your higher self and it begins to get excited and begins to communicate with you, the way you know that you're in alignment is because it feels visceral. It feels in your gut. You feel an emotional, positive reinforcement when you're doing something. I'm working on a book right now, and I feel this urgency to get the book done. But it doesn't come as a pressure like a business deadline. There's no fear involved. It's more just joy. When I'm writing, I feel very happy. And I'm committed to finishing it because I just feel fantastic about it. I know then that I'm 100% aligned with what I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do. And I'm following my greater joy, and I'm embracing what comes. If there's a day when I can't write, I don't write. It's okay. It's important to understand that what we perceive is not necessarily what we would want. I mean, you could ask me, you may say that, Alberto, if you're in this position, you must be asking your higher self questions all the time. And the answer to that is no. I almost have no questions anymore, because now I understand how everything works. And if I want to know what's coming next, my higher self is not going to tell me. And I'll tell you why. Can you imagine if before tomorrow's your higher self said, "Oh, you're gonna you're gonna you're gonna suffer tremendously tomorrow, and your family's gonna suffer," and from your perspective, you're gonna think, "Oh, that's negative. I don't want it." From their perspective, from the higher self, from a higher consciousness, it's probably the best thing for you. To remember that at that consciousness level, there's no duality. everything is just an experience. So even what we think is bad is really good. And we know it's good because when bad things happen to us years later, we look back to them and we laugh. Well, the same thing, but the higher self has the benefit of hindsight because there's no time for them. Time doesn't exist. They already know what's going to happen. You're the one who doesn't know it. So for you, you may be scared. You may not want to do it. And that's the reason why I already asked the questions I had to ask. The only other thing I need to know is, am I in the right path? And I know I'm in the right path whenever I feel that joy in my gut. I did it in 30 minutes. I hope you don't mind me.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Let me know if there's any questions because I hope I didn't rush through any aspect of it. It's just that I'd like to simplify things as much as possible.
So because we have more time, do you want to just open it up and then ask your questions instead of me reading it from the chat, since we have time? So Wendy, do you want to go ahead and you had a couple questions?
Okay, I think that's a great idea, Alexa. Wonderful. So I had some questions. Alberto. Okay, so my question was, so for some of us who may have problem, in the beginning of realizing exactly who we're talking to and not trusting it. So my question is, how did you know that the information about the soul was truth? Is it because you had already tested the info you had received about cancer on Google? Did that give you some confidence?
Yes, but I think that this deals with fear. So when we begin, we we remember we come from a prison, so we're only going to behave the way that we have been behaving inside of the prison. And fear is part of what we're programmed with. We're victims. We live in fear. We're in anger all the time. So it's expected for us to have those feelings and thoughts as we go through the ascension in consciousness. When I confirmed the information, I knew that whatever that came from, wherever that it came from, that is truthful. I learned that because I was able to confirm it. I also felt it, by the way, in as along the way, we're going to learn to develop our own abilities, but we have to practice and be very attentive. When you drive a car in one tire is a little bit out of alignment, you got to be able to feel that and be able to tell that that's what's happening. So pay attention to your body, pay attention to your emotions, because you're going to learn a lot from them. And what I have at the beginning, everything I did, I would do like a mantra for protection. But as time went on, I realized that if you can get yourself to live in a high frequency state on a constant basis, there isn't a single negative entity that has come to me, period. So there was no need. See, almost like when I asked for protection, I was coming from the perspective of fear. Once I worked on my fears, I no longer needed protection because by not having fear, I was already in a higher frequency. And I've had opportunities where we've had things happening at the house that, my wife got a little scared and she even brought a priest to do an exorcism. She told me I brought in the devil into the house because of things that were happening. We had things that were disappearing and they disappeared right in front of her. And for me, it was just because obviously she needed to see that. Otherwise, they would have just disappeared in front of me and I would not have cared. But I was literally expecting, a little dwarf coming around the corner and saying, "Hey, hi, how are you doing? Hey, I'm the one who's doing this to you." It never happened. There was no. I mean, if you can live in a world of high energy, And I mean, forgive everybody that you can. Work on releasing the victimhood mentality. Release every fear you can. Just as an athlete mentally plays the game, a tennis player, before they play against their opponent, they will already play the game 5 times in their mind. So play the game of coming across whatever it is that you fear and learn not to be fearful. Release those energies so that you won't have any problems if you remain a loving being. What's going to happen is you're going to be such bright light that any negative entity would just not want to come anywhere near you because they'll feel like you're burning them. I worked with different people to try to help them over time. And I worked with a person who, as a child, she'd been exposed to very negative things. Their family was bad. And they would put in negative entities, demons, to scare her, literally. But what she found inside of her is that if she run to these demons and hugged them with all the love she could have, these demons they wanted nothing to do with her. Nothing. They would run away from her. They were scared from her just because she was so much light. In the end, of course, she broke away from her family and she became a person of good because that's who she was. But she told me that. She said, if you ever come across anything like that, love them very much and they can't stand it. So it's just the frequency that you can hold. So there is it's normal to be skeptical, it's normal to be fearful because that's where we come from. But it's part of our work. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, that's a great explanation for non-physical entities and frequency matches, and I understand that. But what about, there are some people saying that they now have 3D tech access, like V2K, things coming through their Wi-Fi whispers, things of that nature. And for someone who is experiencing that, do you have some sort of a framework where they could work with something like that?
So the book allowed me to do a lot more internal work as I was writing through it, because I had to, of course, internalize the thoughts. And the one thing that I came to understand is that you get to a point, as you raise your frequency and your consciousness, you get to the point that all those things that we call bad are not bad. They're just an experience. So chemtrails, just an experience. And you can say, well, all this Wi-Fi stuff, just an experience. If you figure out a way to clear yourself from it, for example, the magnetic bed that I created, well, that's because that's what my experience was supposed to be. So I can help other people with the same thing. But at some point, it's just an experience. If you're an autistic child, everybody thinks that you're dysfunctional, that you're handicapped, and it turns out that they're more skilled than we are. So it's really the perspective. And when a higher consciousness requires for us to be able to reframe things. And a bad politician is just an experience. And if we chose to incarnate here, it's because we chose to have those experiences. Does that help?
Yes, that's a great answer. Thanks. I think Alex might have some questions now. You had something in the chat. Alex, do you want to go ahead and ask?
Alberto, wonderful presentation, as I anticipated.
Thank you.
Now, my my question is this, to follow up with Wendy. Right now, we are, by design, we're bombarded with misinformation all the time. And what happens in here is when I talk to my higher self, I see all of these things happen, and they basically gave me a process. And the process is this: the information is being available to everyone. The first step is if you're open to receive it. If you're open to receive it, the information has come to you. You will interpret it according to the vibrational level you have at the time. And therefore, that process is not digital, it's analog. Because at another time, let's say a few hours later, when your vibrational level is different and the same information is still there for you, you interpret it differently. And therefore, moving forward, you're creating something which is what? The subjective truth. And all of a sudden, the truth is there, but everyone interprets it differently. And this is by design, in order to create the confusion that we're in today, which does not allow us to move forward, cooperate, see the truth. The truth is only one, is not many. And then not to be allowed to co-create, to move towards the quantum field, which is everything vertically and horizontally aligned. That is the response from my higher self. It makes perfect sense to me, but that is a comment. What I would also like to add to your presentation, which I think not only it was wonderful, but very timely. I have been giving a lot of presentations myself. And what happens now is they're looking to find out who the people are, internal alignment, and then when they go to work in some place, to have alignment of what it is they do with the strategic direction of the company in order for the collective of the organization to be able to execute. And for the life of them, they do not know how to do it. Also, they do not know how to express it. That's where we're at now. That's what I thought. Your presentation, it's spot on, plus very, very timely.
So I'll comment on, sorry, I'll comment on the misinformation. I used to run triathlons, and to get to do that, I had to. The toughest thing, I didn't have problems swimming or biking. The biggest problem I faced was running. As a kid, I was told that with a flat foot, I wouldn't be able to run ever. And in order to run a long distance, I had to start running 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. It's a process. And as I run more and more, my body became adept to it. Information and discernment is the same thing. There's a lot of misinformation because we're being given an opportunity to understand, to discern, and to learn. At first, it's painful, just like my first 5 minutes were. Once I got to 30 minutes, 40 minutes, I realized I could go on for a lot longer. The same thing will happen with us. It'll be slow. It won't be for everybody. Some people are exiting right now. Yes, the vaccines are taking some people with them, but that's because they didn't sign up for it. My dad didn't sign up for it. But for those who are staying behind, it's because we're given the opportunity to go from slavery to freedom. And yes, we're going to be lied to and we're going to fall for it. Just like I struggled to run more every day. But it is just the experience for us to be able to look back and feel the pride, feel happy about having gone through it. It's difficult at first, and we come in groups like this one so that we can help each other. And there's people who are not interested. Like you said, their truth is a different one, which is perfectly fine. To each their own universe.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know, Wendy, if there's another one.
Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? Now's time. It would be great.
Yeah, Alberto, thanks for your talk. And I think everybody, some people are like, well, what's your higher self? Can you explain what that means to you and everybody else? But I think,
I'll answer that if you want.
well, for right now, you can in a little bit. But the construct is until you understand that you have a higher self and the understanding comes to you that it maybe be another part of yourself. I just got done talking with a friend of mine. His name's Jeff, and he awoke and he'd get this guy. My name's Sam, and he would speak to him within his head. He thought that was crazy. He thought he was going nuts. I said, Jeff, why are you so upset? He said, I don't trust him. Again, it's that construct of going from 3D to trust to what's all this love vibration and all this other stuff. We're really moving fast through this construct of what we've been taught with judgment and all the religious dogma that we've been taught as a kid, and things of that nature. But for myself, I'm kind of like you, Alberto. I had an out-of-body experience. I was going to ask you a little about remote viewing as well, too. It's like, can you just like pop out and go see things, or feel things? I'm more of a feeler, not so much of a viewer. So that's another remote viewing is really, it's a feeling. It's not something that you see. And people kind of construct is like, and I tell people, it says, you know what? So some people, you need to feel it before you can see it. So that is kind of like the quagmire of remote viewing is like you're supposed to see, and not necessarily. It's mostly, even if you're supposed to remote view, you're not supposed to be using your cognitive, rational mind. You're just supposed to feel it and not interpret it. Just feel and just write it down. Don't think about it. Just write it down. And the construct is like, I had an out-of-body experience, and I'm like, I wanted to talk to my higher self. I've always wanted to have a communication with my higher self. And all of a sudden, I went to bed one night, and next thing I know, I'm up out of my body. I'm looking down at my house, and there was like something tagged on my back, and all of a sudden, I got yanked up. Bellevue disappeared, Nebraska disappeared. Central America started disappearing. I'm going, I'm being abducted by aliens, and I want to see the craft. So I try to turn around and look to see where I was going. And when I did that, flunk, I found myself back in my body with my head twisted in the pillow. So I woke myself back up out of this experience. So then all of a sudden I go, good. I sabotaged that experience because I was getting too excited because I've had other alien abductions scenario, and as you can see, this Nebraska ASD. I'm your MUFON field investigator. I'm an assistant state director, and I also work with the ERT, which is the Experiencer Research Team, which is I've talked with other people who've had ET in contacts, ET experiences. So the next night, I go to bed, jump into bed. I was pretty tired.
Yeah.
I shut my eyes. And I instantly see this image. Guess what I saw? I saw a craft. I saw a craft. So my higher self goes, oh, you need a craft, right? Whonk, there's the craft. The next thing I know, there it is. I went whoosh, went straight towards it. And the image changed. And there was a ceiling. And then there was a doorway in the ceiling, and it had this lattice work. Kind of lattice, on the doorway, I'm like, oh, doorway. So I reached up, flunk, pulled it down, and went straight up. Total darkness. I'm like, total darkness. And a voice came to me and says, this is what something that's kind of cool that you think, Alberto. The voice came and said to me, you are who you are. I'm like, Like, who are you? What are you doing? What's going on? And all of a sudden, I got this download of information, and I'm listening to it, and it's just coming, wonk, wonk. And it got way above my comprehension and the wording and the whole thing. And I'm like, I'm not getting it, you know? And I continued this download of information until it stopped. And I said, who are you? And the voice came back, says, this is your higher self. I'm here to show you something. And all of a sudden went, whoa. I went down in frequency, and I saw myself with these two little animals. They were like cows, little calves, and they had this yin yang, black white scenario going on. And I'm hugging them up, loving them up like I love up my dogs. You know, I just hug them and love them. You know, and I woke up. So the perspective that I learned from that was, you are who you are. You are what you are. Make yourself as your belief patterns. And then I went down from a higher state. Suppose, you know, this darkness, that was the void. Some people talk about the void. There's zero, there's no polarity. It's just pure creation, pure love, pure whatever. And then I said, I went down. I think I went down in the frequency so you could start seeing things. And I saw the cows. So it was saying, you live in a animalistic behavior with these polarities of the yin yang, and you're just to embrace it with your love.
Fred.
And that was my message. Yes.
That was unfreaking believable. And we're going to have another call where we actually go in deep, because you're taking us off in a whole other direction, which is totally cool. And there's a group.
Well, again, it's the construct of it. So how do you interface your higher self? That was perspective. I mean, again, I didn't know what my higher self was. It was just a voice that came to me, you know? And a lot of people
remember what I said, that you don't get what you want, you get what you need.
Right.
So if and I'm no one here, I'm no one to judge. When I remember that the reason why it's Alberto's universe is because I can only share from the perspective that I understand.
Correct.
And that's whatever interpretation of that universe I have. If I was to go and say, hey, I'm ready for Cirque du Soleil, I'm excited, I want a show in front of me, you know, I want to be entertained. Is that a low or a high frequency state of mind?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then of course, should I expect, let's say, my higher self to communicate, or maybe I'll just get a show. If it is the right thing for me to get a show, such as things disappear in the house, because that's like a magic trick, right? Then that's what I'm going to get.
Right.
Is that the higher self? Does it make a difference? Because at the end of the day, your higher self is you. Yes. It's just the one that is there to make sure that whatever you do, all this fun stuff that you're having, everything that I'm doing, making a mistake on the appointments, or, you know, getting into a dispute with my mom or my family or whatever I choose to do, that's me. It's why I came here. But at the end of the day, I have to be aligned in that when this deadline comes, I need to be pointing in that direction. I need to be living in that city, or I need to be of this level of energy so I can be ready for whatever comes next. So I think it's fantastic. I think what you're describing is great. And I agree with you that it is more feeling than seeing, because you have to understand that your third eye is connected to your limbic system. It's right there with your emotional side, where you have your feelings. So that's the reason why everything we do will be mostly feelings. Some people will hear, some people will see, some people will feel, but in most circumstances would be based on feelings. And feelings have frequencies, and they're closer to the language of the universe. Therefore, we would get mostly feelings. And if you then go into, if you fall asleep, and you are able to then project yourself and have such an experience, I think that's fantastic. I think it's awesome. I think it's part of the show. You know, um, would an extraterrestrial be at the same frequency of your higher self? No, I don't care how angelical they are. You know what I mean? Your higher self is right there with God. It's so that super high frequency. So depending on the frequency that you're in is who you may be able to come in contact with. You know, a lot of times we think of the Pleiadians or this group or that group as being angelical, but if it's a commander of a ship, and they're engaged in war with this or that group, then they couldn't be that high of consciousness because they're still having to deal with all that. So our energy state would open the gate to the kind of experiences that we're ready to accept. And but it's important for me that we never forget that no matter how much time it takes us to engage our higher self, that being is always there, always loves us, whether we acknowledge it or not. It's always there because it is us and we are it.
Mark Wentz, you have a question?
Yeah, Alberto, or anybody else, of course. Okay, I have these little, my question is, do you have suggestions on how to better communicate with your soul body and better understand what and why it does and what it may do? I try this method where I put myself in a dark room. It's like having blinders on, but it's in a dark room.
Yep.
And I just watch the room. It's black. You can't see anything. It's black. So you're really just seeing your mind's eye. I like to think that it's improving my ability to understand what my soul body does when it leaves, especially maybe during dreams. Do you have any little procedures or methods that you do to try to understand your higher connection with your higher self and your connection with your overall soul tree? Do you have any things you do? You know, I just threw out one of the things I try to do. Do you have things that you do?
I have not had any urgency to connect with any other fractals or myself. I have not had any urgency to go beyond the questions I asked about how everything works, because that's my nature. I want to understand how things work. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be relevant, but just as I was able to find the answers, I think you can as well. And all I suggest is, if it is a question in general about how things work, you know, like science stuff, then the universe gives you the answer. If it is about you, what is important for you in this life, your higher self does. And in either case, you have to, of course, what you're doing is fine, which is clearing your mind from visual noise, you know, because light is noise. You know, when you're in a room and it's lit and you got screens moving, or, you know, people are moving around, that's noise. And whether you do it in the dark or in an infrared room, it's the same, you know, just quieting your eyes. The same thing with noise. You know, if you in a quiet room, some of these autistic children, what they would do is they would jump on bed and put like 20 pillows around their head, so they would mute the light and the sound, so they could then go telepathically to the hill. If that's what you're attracted to, you feel it in your gut that that's what you want to know, then you will be able to do it. If you're not able to do it yet, it's 100% to do with the frequency of where you are. In other words, you may have to work on forgiving. You may have to work on fears. For example, I'll tell you how, because I solve problems all the time, and I go back and forth with my higher self, with the universe, to get the answers. For many years, I was having dreams, and in these dreams, every single time I would go to Spain, arrive to a hotel, and then leave the hotel to go see a friend, and then realize I don't have my cell phone, I don't remember the hotel name, I don't have the keys to the room. And other times, I would park my car in a mall, and then realize that I don't know which side of the mall I left it. So it's almost like I was like forgetting stuff. Now, there's people who interpret dreams, and they have versions of why I was having those dreams. I had a lot of dreams, all of them very similar. I just asked. And what it ended up being is that I was still seeing negative people as negative. I was still seeing, and I'm going to say it, I was still seeing the reptilians as bad people. And I needed to get to the point where I could understand that they're just having an experience. Think about it. Forgiving the negative beings, forgiving the bad people. And how do I know that that was what I had to do? Well, because the day I worked on it and I focused on it, and as I went through it, the dream stopped. Never again. So everything we go through, it's a class. And the class won't stop, won't end until we pass the test. You know, you gotta sit down, write down the test answers, and turn it in. And if you learn, you pass, and that's it. The class ends. You don't have to be there anymore. So the answers, I don't care how complex or how simple, the answers will always be there. It's just a matter of, you know, being in the right frequency, listening, and sometimes, I mean, I wasn't able to come up with the right guidance on that immediately, because I was not ready to forgive. I was not ready to stop seeing the duality of the world. So it was going to take time, and if there's certain goals you have, the same thing. If you're not able to reach them, it may just be that there's something that you have to work on. And it always has to do with frequencies. And when you think frequencies, think state of mind, think of, where's your heart? I hope that helps.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up because Alberto's been kind enough to do this from his car at the airport. Thank you so much, Alberto. I appreciate it. And I want to thank every single one of you guys for showing up here. You are amazing. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for making our very first call a success. Thank you, everybody. Alexa, thank you for moderating. I couldn't have done it without you. So hopefully we'll be able to do this again in the future. I hope you guys all had a lot of value out of it too. I appreciate it so much. Okay. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Namaste.
Namaste.